And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, April 15th. I am the host for today's program, Paul Demain, and we encourage you to go to our website, IndianCountryNews.com, where you can find a link and subscribe to our publication as well, News from Indian Country. And today we go to talk to Lori Townsend of Alaska Public Media about a recent court case allowing tribes in Alaska to put land in trust. Here is our conversation about that and a few other things happening in the north of the North Country. Lori Townsend, thanks for joining with us on the Native News Update today. I'd like to have you talk a little bit about a subject that's been in the news recently with this decision about putting land in trust for Alaska Native communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision and what you're hearing from the Alaska perspective about that?
Sure. Good morning, Paul. It's good to be on with you today. This ruling is seen by tribal advocates as a huge victory and something that Heather Kendall Miller of the Native American Rights Fund said wasn't a surprise, that it was exactly what they wanted to have happen and actually what they expected to have happen. It essentially says that the Secretary of the Interior cannot discriminate against tribes in Alaska and treat them differently than other tribes, that he can still take petitions to consider taking land into trust, and that tribes should be treated equally. A lot of people in Alaska thought that the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act extinguished Aboriginal title to land, but it didn't extinguish their inherent sovereign rights. And so therefore the D.C. court, the circuit court in Washington, agreed that tribes should not be treated differently here. From the Attorney General's perspective of the state, it's left a huge question mark. When I interviewed him, he really had no answers. He doesn't know what this will mean and how it may impact jurisdictional issues, if tribes will be able to have law enforcement jurisdiction in those areas. To him, it's a big question mark legally.
Well, let's ask a few questions. Number one, what year was the Alaskan Land Claims Act?
The ANCSA, Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, was in 1971.
So it's not that long ago. I mean, I'm saying people might be thinking all this stuff took place with the extinguishment of the land title, 100 years ago. But we're talking about 40 years
recent
ago.
History. Yeah. Yes, 40 years ago, yes. Yeah.
And just to jump out of this trust conversation for a second, but get back to it, recently the Violence Against Women Act was passed, and it applied to the lower 48 and Hawaii, but somehow written into the law was a clause that exempted Alaska villages. Do you perceive that there's some kind of a similar legal angle to this, where they're saying, hey, you can't do that to the Alaska Native villages just because you think you ought to exempt them?
Well, what happened with VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization, was Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski put an amendment in there that essentially made it clear that all other villages and tribes in the state were excluded from having jurisdictional authority except for Metlakatla, which is the only still existing reservation in Alaska. There were 7 at the time of the Land Claims Act, and now there's only 1 left, Metlakatla. And so she put an amendment in there that really infuriated tribal advocates here in the state, and they're fighting against that, trying to get that repealed. I don't know if they'll be able to prevail in that respect, but there is another legal case right now that's in the court system, and a decision out of the Alaska Supreme Court will come sometime this summer, possibly in June, that could deal with that issue of jurisdiction over tribal members who are from different tribes being in a tribal court in another tribe's jurisdiction, or non-tribal people who get in trouble in villages. Right now, as it stands, if tribal leaders in a village where there's no law enforcement want someone either banished from their village or someone arrested, their only choices are if they don't have a village public safety officer, and even if they do, they're not armed. So they have to either wait for the state troopers to come in, which can take days sometimes, or if they try to contain the people themselves, then they put themselves at risk of possibly being in legal trouble with the state for acting with authority that they presently legally aren't recognized to have. So there's a few things going on here. This case that's being heard here in the Alaska Supreme Court, and then this new decision out of the D.C. court that the state says they will absolutely appeal and could possibly end up in the U.S. Supreme Court.
What was the issue that brought that whole case work together? Tell us what the tribes are trying to do, or who is trying to do it.
Yes, there are a few villages. The Chilkat Native Association, the Akiachak Native Association, one individual Native person, and I believe a couple of other villages that have land that they, not a lot of land, but land that was either bequeathed to them or they have that they want to put into trust so that they, in the Chilkat Native Association, for example, they have 76 acres where they've got some tribal low-income housing built on. They've got some office buildings, and they're surrounded by Haines and the borough there, and they want to protect themselves from taxation and seizure. So there's these little pockets of land that are non-ANCSA lands. It's unclear if ANCSA, the ANCs, the Alaska Native Corporations, could take ANCSA lands and relinquish it to the tribes and have that put into trust. That is an unclear legal area right now.
Those are the corporate entities that were created to manage lands and resources for the tribal governments that still exist as well, but have very little land with jurisdiction over, or may not. So we're not talking about large tracts of land, but if they can put land into trust, they're allowed to put land into trust in order to protect it from default, from being encumbered, from being taxed and taken away for non-payment of taxes.
Yes.
And this is something that most Alaska tribes seem to be supporting in terms of their ability to put land in trust. You see a strong...
The tribes, I am certain that the majority of tribes would certainly support this option, at least the option of being able to petition to have land put into trust, and also perhaps have some jurisdictional issues when it comes to public safety, regulating alcohol, these kind of civil things that they would like to be able to have control of when they're in remote locations. I don't know what the response from the corporation heads will be, if that will be an area of tension or not. Most of the tribes, the corporations manage the lands and develop economic opportunities on those lands. Fort Yukon is different in that the tribe took control of the land back because they were afraid of the land being protected. The corporations, theoretically, a corporation could go bankrupt and the land could be seized, and then it's just gone. So Fort Yukon, Athabascan people, the Gwich'aji, Gwich'in up there took their land back in control of tribal leaders. Then they work with their corporation and say, okay, you guys go make money. Your mandate is economic development, do those things, but we'll keep control of the land. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of deals they work out between the ANCs and the tribes.
Right, and what kind of cases. And the final result, you say this is being appealed, it may end up in the U.S. Supreme Court, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But at least a temporary victory from the end of the tribes, the way they see it at the moment.
Well, and the judge did ask for more briefings from both sides. He's looking for some remedies to clarify some of these issues. So it's unclear what that will mean going forward. So there isn't a final decision yet written on this. He wants more clarity from both sides, the state and the tribes that brought the suit. So the Attorney General said it's possible that they could get something called, I think it's an well, I better not try to say it because I'm not sure of the legal term, but it's an appeal before it actually has the final rule.
Right.
Interlocutory appeal.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. What's interesting to me is that these tribal cases, whether they're from tribes on the lower 48 or Alaska or wherever they are, tend to be cases in which an issue is being litigated, and by the time you're done litigating it, you're not even quite sure what the form and shape of the questions are as they make their way up, and you never know where the courts are going to go to unravel or put together their decision. Very complex, and in part because these cases, people tend to see them as applying to all tribal governments, despite the fact that most of the tribes in the lower 48 and Alaska has very specific treaties, laws, and doctrines that mean that some of these decisions can only be applicable to the tribe that's brought them. But
yes, that will also remain to be seen what happens in that regard, if the ruling could be narrowly applied or broadly applied.
Yeah, it could be. There could be tribes in the lower 48 that says they've had a parcel of land rejected for trust and re-examine the reasoning behind that, watching another case going to the Supreme Court. So you just never know where some of this stuff is going to end up. You said
Absolutely.
You had one or two other things to share with us today, so...
Well, Mike Williams Sr. from Akiachak was voted the 2013 Musher of the Year. He's a Yupik man who has ran the Iditarod for many years in the interest of sobriety. And he's just a fine advocate for healthy living. He's just a fine man. And so it was fun to see that Mike had got the Musher of the Year award this year. So I wanted to mention that. And also, we have sort of the endless winter up here, Paul. It seems, I guess you're getting snow there as well, but we've just had crazy amounts of snow here.
Well, we've got our fingers crossed, but there may be a little bit a delay in presenting this show, and we're hoping that maybe spring will have broken by then, but you're right about that. We're sitting around waiting for a huge snowstorm to hit northern Wisconsin. It is south of us, and it is dumping snow, I guess, all the way from Denver, Colorado. Rain, snow, tornado warnings in some places. It's been quite a year, and we're in mid-April. Now, the good thing about it is that the sugar bush is in full gear, and I hear between the fluctuating temperatures and how it's fluctuating and the amount of water that there is plenty of sap flowing, and so they are boiling like mad.
Yay.
And maybe we can get you a piece of sugar up that way somehow.
I love to hear that.
Okay.
We've had in the last few days, we've had 40 inches of snow in parts of Anchorage. Outside of Anchorage, Eagle River area, they had up to 40 inches of snow in the Highland Road area. Anchorage has had 22 inches, and the average for April is about 4 inches. So we've had quite a bit of snow, and there was an interesting thing. Again, the Fort Yukon folks up there, Edward Alexander is a language and culture instructor at the school in Fort Yukon. And he posted on Facebook the other day that an elder came into his office this winter and told him a story about a winter where no summer came, just another winter, then the regular winter after that. He said, now as I watch the snow fall and fall, I'm beginning to wonder what else he didn't say, why he chose this particular winter to tell me this story, and then walked out of my office laughing. So
first there was winter, and then there was winter, and... Well, we never know. I mean, we're talking about, not just global warming, but climate change is how it's been put. And
yes.
People, tribal elders have been looking at this for some time and saying, there's some interesting things going on that we've never seen before. And so maybe we can have a good talk one of these days about, again, those kinds of climate change, because I think people in the North Country seem to be seeing a lot of different things more than what people in the lower 48 are seeing. I mean, people in Canada seeing fireflies for the first time, or hearing lightning for the first time, things that we assume are just natural and everyday things during the summertime when the summertime does come. So
yes,
we'll get back to you again soon, Lori. Thanks for joining with us today on this issue of the Native News Update, and we'll talk to you again.
Thanks, Paul.
And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Thank you for joining with us, and come back again soon.